Formal education will make you a living, but self-education will make you a fortune. Hey everyone, I'm Dr. Steph, and I'm an assistant prof at U of T Med, and I teach the financial literacy curriculum. It's the start of a new semester, and one of the biggest questions I get from people is, what books should I read to educate myself if I want to achieve financial independence? Given that there are so many personal finance books out there and many of them are American, so the info about Roth IRAs or 401ks aren't going to be as relevant to Canadians who have TFSAs and RRSPs, the books I'm going to talk about in this video are going to be for Canadian audiences. So all of the books I choose to review here are solely my own opinion. I don't have any affiliation with any of the authors, nor was I paid or offered any free products by any authors or publishers to promote these books. So in the description below, I've included the links to the books as well as my selection criteria if you just wanted to learn more on how I decided on these books. So let's get to the first book. Money Like You Mean It by 𝗕cie Alini is a good book to read when you want to get started as a broad overview before doing a deeper dive. 𝗕cie is a personal finance reporter for the Globe and Mail, and this book that she published actually fairly recently is a great book for the millennial and later Gen X audiences. What I liked about this book is that the writing style is very conversational. It's kind of like having a financial talk with a friend. She also covers a lot of new topics that classic personal finance books like The Wealthy Barber or The Millionaire Teacher do not. So for example, those buy now, pay later programs that we see in a lot of online shopping sites, those can really make you addicted to spending when you perceive that you're paying less. I also liked how it covered a lot of the all-in-one ETFs and robo-advisors, which are new products that have made it easier for regular folks to have a low-cost diversified portfolio. The last two chapters of this book talk about family finances, which you don't really see that often in personal finance books, but I definitely talk about it in my lectures. So like, how do you have a financial plan when you're married or have kids? So in this book, she has like a diagram of a money bucket system for how to split expenses with your partner. So that's something I'm trying to implement in my own life as well. And she also touches on things like prenups, financial abuse, and saving for kids' educations, topics that I find is very important and I discuss with my students as well. One area that I would like to see talked about more in this book is what to do when family asks you for money. The last chapter discusses what to do when family can help out with financial gifts, but in my experience, dealing with family who ask for money is actually an even tougher issue to manage. Other than that, this book gives you a pretty good broad overview of a huge range of topics from debt repayment, housing to investing and insurance. And while it has a lot of breadth, it does lack in depth, which is understandable when you're covering so many topics. So that's why I like this book kind of as like a starting point before doing a deeper dive. So that brings me to the next book. All right, so if you want to start investing, I like the book Beat the Bank to start. Now, I used to have a signed copy of this book, but I think I loaned it to someone and I just never got it back. So here's that's why I put a picture of me with the author. So Beat the Bank was written by Larry Bates, and he has worked worked as a Canadian banker for over 35 years. He wrote this book for people like his sister Mary, who didn't work in banking and was invested in mutual funds with 2.3% management fees for many years, but weren't getting good returns on them. It turns out that she didn't realize how much those fees ate into her investment returns, even though, 2.3%, it seems like a low number. When compounded over years, it does erode the gains quite a bit. The biggest takeaway for me is actually the accompanying resource, the TREX score calculator on Larry's website. And I think this is a pretty practical tool. So TREX stands for Total Return Efficiency Index, And I've actually used this tool with my parents who are invested in mutual funds that charged 2.65% in fees. So let me just quickly share screen to show you how this tool works. All right, so this is what the TREX score looks like. And so you input how much you would typically invest. So let's say I'll put in 100,000 and you put in your total return. So average stock market return, for example, is about 6.4%. And then let's say I put in like the 2.65% in fees on the mutual fund that my parents are paying, compounded over 25 years. So when you look at this at the bottom, it shows that your investments will gain 371K, but you actually keep 151K because you lost 220K in fees. So this kind of just shows you how important this compounding is over time. But let's say you invested it in something with lower fees. So let's use 0.5% because that's kind of the typical fees for a robo-advisor, for instance. And so now you see the bigger difference here. Even though you make 371K, you keep a lot more, which is 319K, and you lose 52K in fees as well. All right, so this book helps you recognize the impact of high fees on your gains. Although it doesn't go into a lot of detail on how to start buying low fee ETFs, for that, I like the step-by-step guide from Reboot Your Portfolio by Dan Bortolotti. Dan is a portfolio manager who is known for his blog, Canadian Couch Potato, and he used to have a Couch Potato podcast too, but I don't think it's running new episodes anymore. However, it's still a great Canadian resource that I recommend to my students. Now, this book is written for the average Canadian who just wants to spend a few hours or less on their investment portfolio, and that's it. It's not a book about picking stocks or analyzing companies. So this is a book about how to get average market returns. And, you know, my typical audience is usually doctors who, for most of their lives, have been above average. So I actually really like how this book distinguishes the difference between average returns from being an average investor. And I just wanted to read to you like an excerpt from the book, just because I really like how the way that Dan Bortolotti phrases it. So he says here, the problem here is a misunderstanding of the word average. Do you imagine yourself in a room full of investors, about half of whom are doing better than you are? If so, you missed the point. Indexers don't strive to be average investors. They try to earn returns that equal the market averages. That is a huge difference between those two ideas. Over the past 50 years, from 1971 through 2020, the annualized return on Canadian stocks was 9.6%, while for international stocks, it was 9.3%, US stocks, it was 11.4% over that period. Now, let's be clear, there's no guarantee returns will be that good over the next 50 years. The point is that most investors didn't earn anything close to those numbers. So if you had earned simply index-like returns, you wouldn't have been an average investor. You would have been a superstar. So getting average market returns means you would have actually been in the top 80 to 90% of investors. So that is a really good point that he makes in differentiating that. Now, what I also think Dan does well in this book is he actually gives his own opinion about certain investments as a portfolio manager who is licensed to give financial advice. A lot of personal finance books tend to be written by folks who are not licensed to give financial advice, so they might write in a very general manner. But in this book, Dan will actually say, no, you do not need preferred shares because the risk-reward trade-off has been poor. Or he'll say, you do not need to allocate your portfolio to REITs, which are real estate investment trusts, as a passive way to invest in real estate, since a lot of real estate companies are already part of broad market funds. So it will be like double dipping. So, you know, like it does make me think about that a bit more. And so I really do appreciate the candor because it can help point investors in the right direction instead of giving them like overwhelming a lot of information and just letting them figure out what to do with it. So talked about real estate. So let's move on to real estate. Since real estate is such a big part of many Canadians' investments, The fourth book I chose is on real estate. So this one is called Making Money in Real Estate, and it is the book that I personally use, especially when I'm looking up certain information on real estate investments. And this was written by former lawyer Douglas Gray. It kind of reads like a textbook. So for people looking to, buy their first home or to invest in a rental property, I would say that this is something that you can kind of like use as a reference. It's not something I would read from front to back. So like a textbook, it is quite dense with information. So if you're using it as a reference, for example, let's say you're looking to get a mortgage or you're looking for a realtor, I just might read the specific chapters on those just so that I know what I'm doing, what questions to ask before meeting with them. And then at the back of the book, there are several appendices. So including like a checklist to go through on, what to look for when you're deciding on buying real estate. So it kind of looks like this. And then there are also some property analysis checklists as well as mortgage checklists. So like there's kind of a mortgage charts at the back as well. And this just kind of tells you, how much interest you'll be paying based on the different interest rates. There's also a glossary of terms at the back, which is very useful, especially since there's a lot of terminology to get used to, especially when it comes to real estate investing. All right, so book number 5 is called Retirement Income for Life by Vitesse, who has written extensively on retirement. And so this is, I think, his third book. Even though this book says it's for folks close to retirement, which is not me, what I found reassuring and enlightening at the same time was the data presented on how at age 70, when you think people stop working, instead of their savings going down, it actually went up. It turns out that retired folks were not actually spending less because they were worried about not having enough money when they die. It was actually because they were just physically less able to spend. Like when your health isn't as great anymore or your spouse has passed away, traveling the world in retirement is just less feasible. So it was reassuring to know that, chances are I'm not gonna run out of money when I die. But the enlightening thing for me as a young doctor was, almost every doctor I know retired at age 70 or older. Like one doctor at my clinic retired at age 74. Another doctor I know retired in their 70s, and then 1 year later they passed away. And I know that, and I know this because I ended up inheriting a lot of their patients. So they weren't really able to retire in the way that they would have liked. So as a young person reading about retirement, it was kind of an eye-opener because usually young people follow the example of like senior role models. But now that I know at a young age that I might want to retire earlier, I might have more years to plan for this in advance. And what this book teaches you are the different enhancements that you can make to ensure that you retire comfortably. So this book goes into different cases of, what if you want to retire before 65? What happens to your retirement savings if you or your spouse passes away earlier than expected? Or what if you have a spending shock? I also like how this book debunks the 4% rule, which says to withdraw like 4% of your savings every year adjusted for inflation. And it provides a calculator called PERC, which stands for the Personal Enhanced Retirement Calculator, to help you determine how much to draw down in retirement. The only downside is that you have to be age 50 to use this calculator, or for this calculator to be useful to you. So overall, it's a very comprehensive book for Canadians on retirement. The only thing I would have liked to see is, how does having a corporation, if you're incorporated, change your retirement strategy? Okay, so these are my 5 Canadian personal finance books that I liked, and now I'm curious to know your recommendations. Do you have others that you would recommend to my students? Please leave me a comment, and if you enjoyed this video, don't forget to like and subscribe. Thank you for watching.